Welcome to this deep dive. We pull out the key ideas from interesting sources so you can get up to speed, well, fast.
Yeah.
Today, we're kind of untangling these terms. Myth, religion, cult, and ritual. You hear them thrown around a lot, right?
All the time, and often kind of loosely.
Exactly. So we've got some material here to help clarify how they connect, and maybe more importantly, tackle some really common misunderstandings about cults specifically.
That's right. We've got Lowell Edmonds' chapter title, Myth and Religion, Myth and Cult, Myth and Ritual, from his book Greek Myth. Just the title itself tells you something.
It links them all together right there in the academic study of ancient Greece.
Precisely. It shows these concepts have a deep historical entanglement. Then we're pairing that with a really useful resource from the International Cultic Studies Association, the ICSA.
Okay.
It's called Common Myths and Misconceptions About Cults and Cultic Groups. Super direct.
So the goal here isn't just definitions. We want to show you how these things overlap and where, the usual assumptions, especially about cults, kind of miss the mark.
Yeah, to get beyond the stereotypes.
Okay, so starting with Edmonds, that chapter title, even without reading the whole thing, it signals pretty clearly that when you study myth, certainly Greek myth, you can't really pull it apart from the religion, the specific cults.
Like, the specific groups dedicated to Athena or Dionysus or whoever.
Right, and the rituals they actually did, it suggests these were all woven together.
A cohesive whole, yeah. The myths weren't just stories people told for fun. They were tied into their beliefs, their practices, how they lived.
So how does that ancient connection, that link between story, belief, practice, how does that help us understand the modern idea of a cult? Because that's where the ICSA document comes in, right?
Exactly. It's a really interesting bridge. Edmonds gives us this historical context of intertwined belief and practice. Then the ICSA document takes that word cult, which is, let's face it, super loaded.
Definitely carries negative baggage.
Totally. And it starts trying to, well, unpack the common, often simplistic ideas we have about it.
Okay, so where do they start? With how people get involved.
Yeah. And right away, they challenge this notion that people actively, join a cult.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they argue it's often more gradual. Think about getting into a bad relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It might start out seeming really positive, really appealing. The serious problems, the dark side, only come out later. You wouldn't say someone chose to be in an abusive relationship from the start.
Right, you kind of find yourself in it.
That's the parallel they draw. People often step into what looks like a positive group or situation, maybe focused on self-help or community, and the controlling or harmful aspects aren't obvious up front. It's more like gradual entanglement.
So it's less about a conscious decision to join something bad and more about finding yourself caught up.
That seems to be their point, yeah. And if you link that back to the idea of myth, like from Edmonds, many of these cultic groups have a core belief system.
Like a central story.
Sort of, yeah. It functions like a myth for them. It gives them a narrative, explains the world, gives members meaning, a framework. And the ICSA points out these belief systems can actually seem quite rational.
Rational? How?
Well, they might be built around, say, personal growth techniques or a specific kind of therapy, or maybe even just a unique interpretation of a mainstream religion.
Yep.
It's not always, aliens are coming tomorrow right off the bat.
Okay, so the myth or the core belief system holds it together.
It seems to be the foundation, providing that
Okay.
coherence.
Now, Edmund's title also had ritual in there. We associate rituals with religion and often with cults, too, but the ICSA makes a distinction here.
They do. It's a crucial one. Well, sure, rituals and practices can be part of cultic groups, just like in many religions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The ICSA argues that rituals aren't what defines a group as cultic. The key thing they stress is usually that underlying belief system and how it's used, how it influences and controls members.
Ah, okay, so the ideology is more central than, say, secret handshakes or ceremonies.
That seems to be the argument. The belief system provides the main structure and often the mechanism for control. Edmonds points to the historical links, and ICSA gives us this modern lens trying to clear up these common myths.
And they tackle quite a few myths, don't they? Like, who actually gets involved? There's this idea it's only people with, psychological issues.
Right, and they really push back on that. The
Yeah.
ICSA says, look, everyone has vulnerabilities at different times.
Sure.
And they point to research suggesting that former cult members don't actually show higher rates of pre-existing psychological problems than the general population.
Really? So who is more susceptible then?
It seems to be more about circumstances.
Mhm.
People going through big life transitions, divorce, job loss, moving, or maybe people who are very idealistic, wanting to change the world. Groups that offer clear answers, community, purpose, they can be very appealing during those times.
That makes sense. It's less about being broken and more about being in a state of flux or searching for something.
Exactly. Which also connects to another myth they tackle, the idea that you can always spot a cult.
You know, the weird clothes, the chanting.
Yeah, that stereotype. But the ICSA says these groups vary hugely. Some are isolated and look different, but others, they can be totally integrated into society. No obvious outward signs.
So they could be your neighbors, colleagues?
Potentially, yes.
Hmm.
They might hold what the ICSA would call cultic beliefs or follow controlling practices without it being visible at all from the outside.
Wow. Okay. And what about the leaders? Is it always a case of a cynical con artist pulling the strings?
That's another myth they challenge. The ICSA suggests it's more complex. It's not always intentional deception, apparently.
How so?
Well, they propose a few possibilities. Some leaders might genuinely believe they have special insight or a divine mission.
Okay.
Others, maybe because of their position, think politics, religion, even therapy might just get carried away by the power and deference they receive. Ego inflation, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Then yes, of course, some are deliberately manipulative, maybe even have personality disorders. And interestingly, they suggest leaders might even shift between these states over time.
So it's not just one type of leader, it's a spectrum.
Seems so. A much more nuanced picture than the simple evil mastermind trope.
Which also makes thinking about leaving more complicated. The idea that anyone can leave if they really want to. The ICSA must take issue with that.
Oh, definitely. They use that powerful analogy again, comparing it to domestic violence or abusive relationships.
Okay.
They emphasize how psychological manipulation, coercive control, can seriously undermine someone's ability to think clearly, to make independent choices.
It traps them mentally.
Exactly. They even mention trauma potentially affecting brain function subconsciously. So the idea that you can just snap out of it and walk away, it often doesn't reflect the reality of that kind of influence. The capacity to leave might be genuinely impaired.
But then they also challenge the flip side, the idea that nobody can leave without some big intervention like deprogramming.
Right. And this is really interesting. According to the ICSA, the evidence suggests a large majority, possibly most people, do leave on their own.
Without outside help.
Yeah. But they might not talk about it. There can be a lot of shame, fear, lingering confusion, or pain. So we might not hear those stories as often.
So the perception might be skewed because the ones who leave quietly just disappear from view, in a way.
That seems to be the implication. We might underestimate how many people find their own way out.
Okay. Let's go back to the beliefs and practices. Is it true all cults have, like, secret ceremonies and weird rituals?
Another myth the ICSA tackles. They reiterate that the main thing holding most cultic groups together is the belief system itself.
The myth we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And these systems can be really elaborate, very detailed, and as we said, can seem quite rational on the surface. Not every group necessarily involves, overt meditation, prayer, or hidden rites. The ideology can be the main event.
Which connects to another common assumption, that people involved must be unintelligent or easily fooled.
Yeah, it's this stupid or crazy myth. The ICSA directly refutes this. They say the evidence shows members generally have the same range of intelligence and education as anyone else.
So it's not about IQ points.
Apparently not. It goes back to those other factors, maybe idealism, wanting to make a difference, being in transition, seeking community or answers. Those seem much more relevant than intelligence level.
Okay. And what about after someone leaves? There's often this pressure, maybe implied, to just get over it and move on.
The ICSA addresses that too. The prevailing view among therapists and experts who help former members, they say, is that actually understanding the experience, processing what happened, is often really important for healing.
So not just forgetting about it.
No, quite the opposite. Reflecting on it helps reduce the impact of the trauma. They also mention that trauma itself can sometimes make reflection difficult, and the process of understanding might look a bit like grieving. Stages like denial, anger, acceptance, so it's not always neat or linear for everyone.
That makes sense. It's a significant life event, often traumatic. It needs processing.
For sure. And all this leads to perhaps the most important myth they bust.
Let me guess. It could never happen to me.
Bingo. I would never join a cult.
We all think that, probably.
We do. And ICSA's response is basically a reality check for all of us. They stress that everyone can be vulnerable at certain times. Life circumstances change.
Right.
Different situations make different people open to different kinds of influence or different groups. It can just be about, meeting the right group or person at the wrong time, a time of vulnerability.
And as they said earlier, the group might not even look like a cult at first.
Exactly. That controlling aspect, the cultic dimension, might be hidden initially or presented in a way that's just not easily recognizable.
So wrapping this deep dive up, it's clear these terms, myth, religion, cult, ritual, they're really complexly related. Edmund's title shows their historical links.
Yeah, how they were studied together in the context of ancient belief.
But the ICSA material is crucial for understanding cult today. It really hammers home that these groups are mainly defined by their belief systems and control dynamics, not always by obvious weirdness.
Right. And that involvement isn't about being stupid or broken, and leaving isn't always simple. It challenges so many stereotypes.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Yeah, consider this. Where else in your life, maybe in less obvious ways, do belief systems and group dynamics play a powerful role? Think about work, social groups, politics, online communities.
Good point.
How can understanding these dynamics, the power of narrative, group pressure, vulnerability, help you become more aware, more discerning about potential manipulation or just undue influence, even in everyday settings?
That's definitely something to chew on, how subtle influence works.
Absolutely.
If you want to dig deeper into this, the International Cultic Studies Association website is a great resource. Loads of information there.
And of course, exploring the academic study of religion and mythology can give you that broader context for how belief systems function across cultures and history.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.